Within the NCOM 511 computer, there exists an unknown civilization. A startling new world where time and distance.
It's really creating a myth for modern time.
Still say it to this day, nothing looks like it. I think my first memory of Tron is renting it on VHS tape.
I was 12 years old.
Maybe 12, 13.
I was 2 when Tron came out.
I remember getting dropped off by my mom.
My uncle took me to go and see it in a cinema in Wales.
My mom would go around the mall while we went to the movie alone because we went with my parents and we were very young. And I remember just sitting there and just being overwhelmed by this.
For me, it was something I wasn't totally familiar with, but I always just knew it was Tron.
The screen looked unlike anything I had ever seen a movie screen look like.
So I remember Jeff Bridges, and I remember that it looked crazy.
It's begun.
It's incredible to imagine having this baton that turns into this destructive light bike game.
When we were doing Tron, we had so many limitations, but we just kept going for it.
The original was very cutting edge at the time. Of course, looking back, it looks like an old black and white TV show. But at that time, there was no laptop computers, no internet, nothing.
We didn't have cell phones. We had walkie-talkies that looked like out of a World War II movie. They were called cordless phones, and quite a phenomenon.
Computers like back then were just this incredible, mysterious thing.
There were no PCs. People genuinely feared computers, and they only existed as mainframes.
User requests are what computers are for. Doing our business is what computers are for.
Reading this script and seeing some of the technical language of it, I didn't understand a word of it. And I called my agent, and I told him I wanted to turn it down. I said, no, I don't understand it. Let's look for something else.
I don't get it.
Okay.
It's really interesting talking to Bruce Boxleitner and Jeff about how they were saying terms like program and bit without having any idea what it meant.
Do you think we can merge with this memory bit?
They had no idea, how close they were to predicting a future in which terms like program were second nature.
Hey, it's the big master control program everybody's been talking about.
Tron, I think, was ahead of its time as a tribute to Steven Lisberger.
Steven Lisberger was exploring themes and ideas that have, taken 30 years to become relevant.
Every one of us is in that computer somewhere, whether it's because of our driver's license or Social Security or income tax.
This is a guy who understood things in the early 80s that nobody did.
When we did the first film, the feeling we had about cyberspace was that it was this new frontier and that there was unlimited potential, but there was this sense of unbridled optimism.
Before most people had desktops, Steven Lisberger imagined a world where people would go live alternate realities in a digital universe.
You're a user?
I took a wrong turn somewhere.
We're actually using technology that was kind of hinted at in the original Tron. These days with Facebook, people's blogs, it's kind of something we take for granted, this kind of alter ego. So in a way, the world has kind of caught up with Tron finally.
As the decades rolled out, cyberspace went through the phases that all frontiers go through, where it had to be civilized, and then there's a certain amount of cynicism that comes with that. So I think there's an underlying nostalgia for the frontier days when it was all about unbounded potential.
Every tower is lighting up.
What Lisberger did was he not only gave a sense to something that was coming, but at the same time, he designed something that was timeless.
The look of the world from the original film still hasn't dated, weirdly. It still works for me because I think it isn't just trying to look futuristic.
He had amazing collaborators. He had Sid Mead, who's one of the greatest concept designers of all time.
Tron was a tour de force of technique matched to very difficult methods of bringing that vision off.
Technically, It was the first movie to use computer graphics extensively.
Tron was one of the first films to have more than 20-some minutes computer-generated footage.
We were not nominated for a Special Effects Academy Award because basically the Academy thought we cheated when we used computers to do special effects. Things have certainly changed since then.
The computer world at that time was very limited.
We had no computers on the set of Tron, and probably your cell phone has more computing power in it than we had on the whole movie.
In fact, the limitation produced a lot of the design, the look of the various vehicles. My original idea for the light cycle was to have the rider with a faceplate, and when he got on the bike, the faceplate would match the bike, and he would articulate onto the bike sort of like a pressure suit.
And they just couldn't do it. The computing power just didn't exist to render at that level. Lisberger and team had to use practical tools to make a world that looked digital.
They kind of basically made a movie look digital using handcrafted methods, which is just mind-boggling when you talk to Steve about how every frame had to be hand-tinted frame by frame in order to make them feel illuminated.
The set was just basically black duvetine with the white adhesive tape, marking the things, shot in 70mm black and white.
They sent all of the film over to, Korea to have, all the lights painted in.
So that was the technology. We were all, whoa, this is great,
I ran around in a black and white leotard with our circuitry drawn on us with a black Sharpie. And we had a hockey helmet, motocross pads. I know when we went to the commissary, there was a thing that came down saying that would the actors please wear bathrobes because it was skin tight and we didn't have any pants on. We had like a first male thong.
What's amazing to me is that Tron wasn't a huge success.
It was almost too far ahead of its time. I think audiences just couldn't connect to the notion of users and programs.
But then, of course, it became this cult classic afterwards, largely because of the risks they took.
It's a movie that people appreciate much more now with the benefit of history. And their creative thinking was so strong that it's influenced a number of artists for a long, long time.
So many people have referenced it and copied it in every type of medium, and it became its own thing entirely.
It was a Strokes album, clearly, inspired by Tron. Tron has been everywhere.
What Lisberger came up with really touched a nerve with people and really kind of ignited imaginations in some way.
The original movie was so influential to people who are now artists or designers. There's so many people out there who say, I went to design school because of Tron.
It's great when people say to me, I got into writing software or video games, or I became a computer scientist because I was so inspired by Tron when I was 12 years old.
A lot of your special effects people now in the industry, that was what they saw when they were in grade school or high school, and that has prompted a lot of them to be what they are today.
This is the third year that we're doing Tron here at Comic-Con.
For our generation, there are a couple sort of seminal movies. There's Star Wars being one, but Tron had this added element of being about what's possible in our world and what could be in our world that maybe we're not aware of.
That's Tron. He fights for the users.
Science fiction always kind of leads the way to science fact. As I was told by somebody at NASA, Hollywood creates the dream, and then we take that dream. We try to make it a reality.
I was part of a generation that was very into looking for new frontiers, whole new worlds. And now that the technology is here and part of everyday life, this film, it really belongs to the generation who grew up with this technology. They're not intimidated by it. They see the technology as something that can be clearly used for good or bad. It's their story.